The fall of empire and the rise of knowledge. The Senate chamber was packed with senators in their white togas, their faces arranged in expressions of concern and calculation. This was their moment, the moment when they would seize back some of the power that had been concentrating in the emperor's hands for so long. Livia was brought in under guard, and the chamber erupted in whispers. She was still beautiful, heartbreakingly, impossibly beautiful. She wore a simple white dress, and her dark hair hung unbound down her back. She looked like an innocent victim rather than a schemer. Marcus sat on his throne and forced himself to look at her. He wanted her to understand that he was doing this not out of love or hate, but out of duty to something larger than both of them. Lucius stood before the assembled senators, his arm in a sling from where Marcus had struck him, his voice steady and clear. "I bring evidence of treason," he announced, producing scrolls sealed with the imperial seal. "Evidence of financial fraud, conspiracy, and murder. The woman before you has orchestrated the systematic looting of Rome's treasury, diverting over 50 million denarii to her family's accounts. More gravely, evidence suggests she conspired in the murder of our beloved Empress Cassia, poisoning her slowly and methodically so that she might take her place." The chamber exploded in outrage. Senators stood and shouted. Guards moved forward with weapons drawn. "Lies," Livia said, her voice sharp as a blade, cutting through the chaos. "Produced by a jealous brother who never accepted that his emperor had moved beyond him. Every denarius I directed was authorized by the emperor himself. Every contract was signed with the imperial seal. If there is theft, then the emperor is the thief, not I." It was a brilliant defense, and it was partially true, but the autopsy results spoke for themselves. Cassia's organs, when examined, showed unmistakable signs of chronic arsenic poisoning, and the jewelry, Livia's distinctive jade pieces, the ones she had claimed to have lost months ago, had been found in Cassia's chambers, hidden beneath a loose stone in her floor. The evidence was damning. When the vote came, it was almost unanimous. Guilty of murder, guilty of treason, guilty of conspiracy against the state. The sentence was death. Livia's face didn't change when the verdict was announced. Instead, she looked directly at Marcus, and in her eyes, he saw something that might have been love, or might have been the deepest contempt. It was impossible to tell the difference. "You love me," she cried, as guards moved to take her away. "You know you love me, Marcus. You'll never find this with anyone else. Never. You're sentencing yourself to a half-life of duty and emptiness." He didn't watch her leave. He couldn't, because she was right. He did love her. Against all reason, against all evidence of her monstrousness, he loved her still. They executed Livia at dawn, on the same stone where enemies of Rome had been dispatched for centuries. Marcus didn't attend. Instead, he sat in his study, drinking wine that tasted like ashes, waiting for the relief that never came. The relief didn't come because with Livia gone, the void she left revealed something even more terrible. Marcus had let the empire crumble while he was distracted with her. The borders were weaker. The armies were restless. The provinces were beginning to question whether Rome was worth serving anymore. In the 6 months following her execution, 3 separate revolts erupted. Germanic tribes invaded the Rhine frontier. The grain shortages that had been masked by Livia's theft became undeniable, and the people began to starve. In Alexandria, a governor attempted to declare himself emperor. Marcus tried to salvage what he could. He threw himself into the work with desperate intensity, making decisions that were often brilliant but increasingly erratic. He appointed Lucius as his chief military advisor, gesture of reconciliation that felt hollow on both sides. He cut spending on luxury projects and redirected the funds to the military and agriculture. He even considered abdicating and installing a more capable leader. It was during this period that the plague came. They called it the Plague of Marcus, though no historian now believes it had anything to do with him. It swept through the empire like a vengeful god, killing indiscriminately. Rich and poor, soldier and civilian, guilty and innocent, they all fell before it. The death toll was immense. Entire cities were emptied. The economy collapsed as workers died faster than they could be replaced. And through it all, Marcus worked, trying to hold together an empire that was actively dissolving around him. Lucius came to him one night, his face grave. "You have the plague," his brother said simply. Marcus didn't deny it. He could feel it in his bones, the creeping cold that no amount of wine could burn away. He had perhaps days left, maybe weeks if he was fortunate. "I know," he said, "but there is still so much to do. You must rest. You must preserve your strength." "For what?" Marcus laughed, and it sounded like the bark of a dying dog. For another woman, another betrayal, another descent into madness. Lucius sat down heavily. For Rome, for the 2 children Cassia left us, for the legacy we're supposed to leave behind. Marcus looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw a man aged by bitterness and worry. He saw the cost of his own mistakes written in Lucius's face. "Do you remember when we were boys?" Marcus asked quietly. "Before all of this, when we used to play in the gardens, and father told us stories of conquest?" Lucius nodded. "I believed those stories made us great," Marcus continued. "I thought that empire and power and control were the measures of a man. But I was wrong, Lucius. They don't measure a man. They only reveal what he already is. A man is measured by who he loves wisely and who he protects. Everything else is dust." "Is that what you've learned?" Lucius asked. "It's what I've learned too late," Marcus said. In the days before his death, Marcus became obsessed with a single project. He gathered the empire's greatest physicians and alchemists, and he tasked them with creating a comprehensive catalogue of every known poison and every known antidote. Some of his advisors thought he had gone mad. Why would a dying emperor spend his final days on such a project? Why not compose treatises on philosophy or military strategy? Why not prepare the empire for succession? But Marcus understood something that the others didn't. He understood that his greatest failure had been his ignorance. He had been poisoned slowly, methodically, by a woman he loved, and he hadn't even recognized it. He had mistaken the poison for wine, the venom for virtue. If he could do nothing else with his remaining life, he could at least ensure that future generations would be better equipped to recognize the poisons around them, both literal and metaphorical. The Imperial Poison Registry, as it came to be known, was a monumental achievement. It contained information about arsenic, hemlock, belladonna, monkshood, nightshade, and dozens of other compounds. But more importantly, it contained something Livia never understood. The antidote to poison wasn't always a chemical counteraction. Sometimes it was simply information, knowledge, the light of understanding that revealed the darkness for what it was. The registry also contained detailed descriptions of the symptoms of poisoning, the timeline of various toxins, and the methods for testing suspected poisons. It was revolutionary. It was systematic. It was the work of a dying man trying to make meaning from his mistakes. Marcus died on a cold winter morning, with Lucius at his bedside and the registry nearing completion. His last act as emperor was to sign the decree that would establish the registry as imperial livery copy to be preserved, every physician to be trained in its contents, every future death of a noble to be examined for signs of poisoning. Lucius succeeded his brother, and he proved to be a far more capable emperor than Marcus had ever been. Without the distraction of grand passion, without the weight of obsessive love, Lucius could think clearly. He rebuilt the borders, he reorganized the treasury, he ensured that Rome remained strong. But he never married, and in the private quarters of the Palatine Palace, he kept Marcus's final letter, a document that would eventually be discovered by historians and passed down through the ages. In that letter, Marcus wrote, "To whoever reads this, know that I was not a bad man. I was a man who confused desire with destiny and passion with purpose. I had the power to rule the world, but I lacked the wisdom to rule myself. My brother Lucius is everything I should have been: steady, true, capable of sacrificing his own desires for the good of those he's meant to protect. But this is not a condemnation of myself, nor a canonization of my brother. It is simply the truth that a man cannot serve 2 masters. I tried to serve Rome and serve Livia, and in trying to serve both, I served neither. I betrayed Rome and enabled the betrayal of Cassia. The poison that killed my wife taught me nothing. The poison that killed the empire, my own moral poison, taught me everything. And the poison that now kills me is merely the physical manifestation of poisons I had already allowed into my soul. I asked forgiveness not for myself, but for Cassia, whom I failed. I asked that her children remember her as the empress she should have remained, and that they learn from her example what it means to be steadfast in duty. And to Livia, whom I still love, may the gods forgive me, I say this: you were right that I would never find again what we had, but you were wrong that it was worth destroying everything to possess it. Some loves are not meant for this world. Some fires burn too bright, and in their burning, they destroy everything around them. You were such a fire. To those who read this and judge me harshly, you are right. To those who read this and judge me kindly, you are wrong. Judge me truthfully. See in my life the pattern that repeats again and again throughout history. A good man made monstrous by his desire for something he could not have. A powerful man made weak by his weakness for a beautiful woman. A wise man made foolish by his inability to recognize his own blindness. This is the knowledge I leave behind, not in scrolls or monuments, but in the story of my fall. Let it serve as warning. Let it serve as truth. Let it serve as the antidote to the poison of believing that any of us are strong enough to handle power without faith, duty, and unwavering moral clarity. 2,000 years passed. The Palatine Palace crumbled to ruins, then was slowly excavated by archaeologists who marveled at the sophistication and beauty of what they found. The Poison Registry was discovered among Marcus's papers, preserved in a sealed chamber. Medical historians studied it extensively and found that much of its information was accurate enough to be valuable, even by modern standards. Historians argued about whether Livia actually poisoned Cassia. Some believed the charges completely. Others suggested that Lucius had fabricated evidence out of jealousy and political calculation. The truth, as is often the case with ancient history, remained elusive, buried beneath 2 millennia of retelling and interpretation. But one thing was certain: the story persisted. It went viral, in the language of that ancient world, retold by historians, dramatized by playwrights, painted by artists, discussed in universities and schoolrooms across centuries. Why? Because it contained something eternal. It contained the timeless tragedy of a good man undone by his own weakness. It contained the ageless tension between duty and desire. It contained the cautionary truth that power, no matter how vast, cannot protect you from the consequences of your own moral choices. In the 2020s, when humans had created devices that could connect all of them to a vast network of information, when they had built a civilization that would have seemed like magic to Marcus, his story went viral again. People watched dramatizations on screens of light. They discussed it in comment sections. They wrote essays and created videos analyzing his choices and debating whether they would have done the same. And in doing so, they were asking the ancient question: how do we know when we're being poisoned? How do we recognize the toxin that enters our souls slowly, disguised as love or ambition or simple human need? The answer, Marcus had learned too late, was to never mistake the intensity of a feeling for the rightness of an action. To never assume that power could compensate for moral weakness. To understand that the antidote to poison, both literal and metaphorical, was knowledge, clarity, and the unflinching ability to see ourselves as we actually are, not as we wish to be. The Imperial Poison Registry became the foundation of toxicology as a discipline. By the Renaissance, copies had been rediscovered and translated, and physicians began to systematically study toxins based on Marcus's work. By the modern era, the registry had evolved into the science of toxicology that saved thousands of lives annually. Doctors treating patients for accidental poisoning, drug overdoses, and occupational exposures all benefited from knowledge that originated in Marcus's desperate attempt to create meaning from his suffering. But perhaps the more important legacy was legal. The case of Marcus and Livia became a precedent for the investigation of suspicious deaths among the nobility. What had started as Lucius's jealous suspicions evolved into the forensic science of autopsy and analysis. By the modern era, the idea that a body could contain evidence of poisoning, that a poisoner could be detected and punished, that justice could be pursued through careful examination of the physical remains, all of this traced back through an unbroken chain to Marcus's reign. He had destroyed himself through his own moral failures, but from those failures, humanity had extracted wisdom. From the ashes of his empire, practices had emerged that protected countless others from the fates that had befallen Cassia, and, ultimately, Marcus himself. Perhaps that was his truest legacy, not the brief empire that crumbled, but the eternal truth about human weakness and the slow accumulation of practices and knowledge that each generation inherited from the one before. Learning from the poison in the previous generation's cup how to identify the poison in their own. In that sense, Marcus never truly died. His story continues, being retold and reinterpreted by each generation, each person finding in it the lesson they most needed to learn. And that, perhaps, is the only immortality that matters, not statues or monuments. Still, the persistent echo of a human truth, reverberating through time, speaking across the gulf of centuries to tell us all the same warning: know yourself, master your desires, serve something greater than yourself, or be destroyed by your own hand. Subscribe, comment, like and share for more interesting stories.